By 9 tomorrow morning, the man who fired you will no longer control this company. The stranger said it so calmly that I almost laughed. Almost. But nothing about the way he stood beneath the cold white lights of the 23rd floor lobby felt like a joke. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 28 years old, 6 months behind on my student loans, and until 8:47 that night, I had been a senior financial analyst at Sterling Aeronautics, a publicly traded aerospace supplier headquartered in Chicago. It was not glamorous work. Most evenings smelled like burned coffee, printer toner, and the lemon disinfectant the cleaning crew used after everyone important had gone home. I lived inside spreadsheets. I found mistakes people hoped no one would notice. That was how I found $12,400,000 moving through accounts where it did not belong. At first, I thought it was an accounting error. The money had been routed through 3 consulting firms and divided into amounts small enough to avoid an automatic review. But numbers have patterns. Lies do too. By the time I traced the final payments to a company controlled by the brother-in-law of Richard Halston, Sterling's chief executive officer, my hands had gone cold. Richard summoned me to his office at 7:30. The city glowed behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows, all silver towers and red brake lights stretching along the river. He did not ask what I had found. He already knew. "Delete the draft report," he said. No greeting. No explanation. Just 4 words. I kept both hands around my notebook so he would not see them tremble. "The transfers have to be disclosed to the board." His smile was thin. "Practiced. You misunderstand your position, Claire. I understand it perfectly." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I am paid to protect the company from financial risk." He leaned back in his leather chair. The clock on the wall ticked once. Twice. "You are paid to follow instructions." That sentence changed something in me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the memory of my father losing his retirement after trusting executives who never learned his name. Or maybe dignity becomes clearest when someone places a price on it. I set the notebook on his desk. "Then you hired the wrong woman." Richard stared at me for a long moment before pressing a button on his phone. Security arrived less than 2 minutes later. My access badge stopped working before I reached the elevator. Human Resources emailed my termination notice while I was still packing a cardboard box with a coffee mug, 2 framed photographs, and a small cactus named Frank that had survived 3 office reorganizations and 1 broken sprinkler. The official reason was insubordination. The real reason was that I had refused to help a powerful man hide what he had done. Nobody defended me. My manager studied the carpet. My coworkers watched from behind glass walls and pretended not to. I understood. Mortgages make people quiet. Health insurance makes them look away. Fear has excellent employee retention. When the elevator doors opened in the lobby, rain streaked the windows in silver lines. My heels clicked across the marble floor, each step louder than it should have been. I was almost at the revolving doors when a man near the reception desk spoke. "Claire Bennett." I stopped. He was tall, perhaps 35, wearing a charcoal suit without a tie. Not flashy, not careless. Everything about him looked controlled, from his polished black shoes to the watch at his wrist. 2 men waited several feet behind him, silent and alert, but he needed no one to announce his authority. The lobby seemed to bend around it. "Do I know you?" I asked. No, his eyes moved to the box in my arms, then to the termination envelope resting on top. "But I know what you refuse to do." My stomach tightened. "That information is not public." "No," he said. "It is not." He crossed the marble slowly and stopped at a respectful distance. Ethan Cross. The name struck somewhere in my memory. Cross Capital. Private acquisitions. Distressed companies. Hostile takeovers conducted with such precision that executives sometimes learned they had lost control from the morning financial reports. Business magazines called him ruthless. Financial reporters called him impossible to predict. Richard had called him something worse during a closed meeting 6 months earlier. Ethan glanced toward the elevators. "Richard Halston fired you because you would not remove evidence from a compliance report." It was not a question. I did not say that. "You did not have to." "Are you recording me?" "No, then why are you here?" For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not softness. Interest. Cross Capital began accumulating Sterling shares 11 months ago. 3 months ago, my investigators discovered irregular consulting payments. Tonight, you confirmed that the problem reaches Richard's office. Rain tapped against the glass. My arms ached from holding the box, but I refused to set it down. I did not confirm anything to you. You refused him. Sometimes that tells me more than a rehearsed statement would. I looked toward the security desk. The guards were suddenly fascinated by their monitors. Mr. Cross, I have just lost my job. I am not interested in becoming part of someone else's corporate war. Good. Good. People who want power too badly are rarely qualified to hold it. He reached into his coat, and I tensed before realizing that he was removing a plain white business card. No logo. Only his name and a telephone number. Call that number at 8 tomorrow morning. I did not take it. Why? Because our final share purchases settle at 8:30. Cross Capital will hold 41% of Sterling's voting shares, and several institutional investors have signed agreements supporting a new board. Their written consents become effective at 9. My fingers tightened around the box. You are taking control of the company. Yes. And what does that have to do with me? His gaze held mine, steady enough to make the enormous lobby feel silent. I need someone who will tell me the truth when everyone else is being paid to stay quiet. He placed the card on top of my termination envelope. You refused a chief executive officer tonight, Claire. Tomorrow, your evidence may determine whether he keeps his office. I stared at him. You do not even know me. I know you walked away from a 6-figure salary rather than place your name beneath a lie. He turned toward the waiting men, then paused. That tells me enough to begin. The revolving doors opened, carrying in a gust of wet Chicago air. Before stepping outside, Ethan looked back at me. By 9 tomorrow morning, the man who fired you will no longer control this company. Then he disappeared into the rain, leaving me alone beneath the white lobby lights with a dead access badge, a trembling cactus, and a business card that felt heavier than the entire box in my arms. At 7:52 the next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with Ethan Cross's business card beside a cup of coffee I had forgotten to drink. Sleep had never arrived. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard Halston behind his polished desk, telling me that my job was obedience. Then I saw Ethan beneath the lobby lights, promising that by morning the company would belong to someone else. My apartment was quiet except for the radiator clicking beneath the window and the distant growl of traffic waking along the Chicago streets. Frank, my stubborn little cactus, sat in the cardboard box on the floor beside me, as though he had also been fired. At exactly 8 o'clock, I called the number. Ethan answered before the first ring finished. Claire. No greeting. No uncertainty. He had known it would be me. You sound very confident for someone who might have given a stranger a false number. I do not give out false numbers. Do you take control of companies before breakfast often? Only when breakfast meetings become inefficient. I looked at the termination envelope on my table. Did the transaction close? The final purchases settle at 8:30. Outside counsel has already received the supporting shareholder consents. A car is waiting downstairs. I stood and moved toward the window. A black sedan rested beside the curb, its engine running beneath a pale gray sky. You sent a car before I agreed to go anywhere. I sent you transportation. The decision is still yours. That distinction mattered. I hated that it mattered. Where would it take me? Back to Sterling. My stomach tightened. I was escorted out less than 12 hours ago. Today you will use the executive entrance. That does not make it better. No, he said quietly. But what happens next might. He did not pressure me. Somehow, that felt more persuasive than pressure. 20 minutes later, I stepped into the sedan wearing the only navy suit I owned and carrying the same cardboard box I had brought home. I left the cactus inside. Frank had suffered enough corporate drama for 1 week. The drive downtown took 18 minutes. Rain clouds hung low over the city, turning the glass towers into dark shapes without edges. When the Sterling building came into view, my chest tightened so sharply that I pressed one hand against my ribs. I reminded myself that buildings had no loyalty. Offices did not remember humiliation. People did. The driver pulled beneath a covered entrance I had only seen senior executives use. A security officer opened my door. The previous night, the same man had watched me leave with my belongings. That morning, he avoided my eyes. Good morning, Miss Bennett. That is a fast change in policy. His face reddened. I follow the access list. So does everyone here. I regretted the words as soon as I said them. He had not fired me. He had a family photograph taped inside the security station and probably a supervisor who measured courage against a paycheck. Fear had made the entire building smaller. I walked through the lobby without using a badge. Two men in dark suits waited beside the private elevators, but neither touched me nor directed me. One simply pressed the button for the top floor. When the doors opened, I expected chaos. Instead, the executive corridor was almost silent. Assistants whispered behind computer screens. Department heads stood in small groups, clutching telephones and coffee cups. Everyone had heard something. No one knew enough. Ethan stood inside the boardroom with one hand resting on the back of a chair. Morning light spilled through the windows behind him. Around the long table sat outside attorneys, representatives of major shareholders, and 7 directors appointed through the written shareholder action that had become effective minutes earlier. Richard Halston stood near the far window with 2 members of the previous board. His face was pale with disbelief. The moment he saw me, disbelief became anger. What is she doing here? Ethan did not look at him. He looked at me. That depends on her. Every face turned in my direction. The previous day, most of these people would not have recognized my name. Now they watched me as though I held the final vote. Richard walked toward the table. Claire, whatever he told you, this is not your concern. You made it my concern when you ordered me to alter a mandatory compliance report. The room changed. It was subtle. A breath held too long. A pen stopped moving. Richard's jaw tightened. Be careful. Ethan's voice remained calm. She was careful. That is why we are here. One of the outside attorneys slid a folder across the table. I recognized the transfer records immediately. The shell companies. The consulting payments. The signatures. The attorney's team had been tracing the same money for weeks, but my draft report had connected the final account to Richard's family. The preliminary independent review confirms Miss Bennett's findings, the attorney said. $12,400,000 were redirected through undisclosed related party transactions without proper board approval. Richard looked around the table, searching for an ally. This is being distorted. Those were strategic payments. To a company controlled by your brother-in-law? I asked. His eyes cut toward me. You were an analyst. Do not pretend that you understand executive decisions. I felt the old fear rise. It sounded like his office. His voice. His rules. Then I noticed Ethan watching me, not rescuing me and not speaking for me. Waiting. He had brought me into the room, but the next step belonged to me. I placed both hands on the back of an empty chair. I understand that you ordered me to remove evidence from a required report. I understand that you terminated me when I refused. And I understand that every person in this room is now deciding whether silence is still profitable. No one moved. Richard gave a bitter laugh. You think Cross pursued this company because you impressed him? He has wanted Sterling for almost a year. You are a convenient witness. The words landed harder than I expected because they sounded possible. I turned toward Ethan. Is that true? He did not hesitate. I began pursuing Sterling 11 months ago. My throat tightened. So the acquisition was never about justice. No acquisition of this size is about one thing. The honesty stung more than a polished lie would have. Then why bring me here? Because ownership gives me authority. It does not give me credibility. He gestured toward the folder. You earned that before I arrived. Richard shook his head. This is theater. No, Ethan said. This is accountability. The newly seated directors reviewed the outside counsel's findings and voted to place Richard on administrative leave pending a full investigation. His authority did not collapse loudly. It disappeared in silence, one person withdrawing support at a time. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt tired. Ethan waited until Richard left with the attorneys before turning to me. The board has authorized an independent office of ethics and corporate integrity. It will report to a special committee of directors, not to executive management. He slid a sealed envelope toward the empty chair. I want you to build it as interim vice president. I did not touch the envelope. You do not know whether I can lead a division. You challenged the most powerful executive in this building when you had no protection. His gaze held mine. Leadership is what people do before anyone gives them the title. Around us, the boardroom remained silent. The previous day, my career had ended because I refused to lower my standards. That morning, a man who had helped take control of an entire corporation was asking me to set his. I looked at the envelope, then back at Ethan. I have conditions. For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. I was hoping you would. My first condition is that no employee is punished for reporting a concern in good faith. My voice carried farther than I expected inside the boardroom. Ethan remained across the table, one hand resting beside the sealed envelope. The directors watched us with the careful expressions of people who had spent entire careers hiding their reactions. Agreed, he said. That was too easy. It was reasonable. Reasonable promises disappear when quarterly earnings fall. A silver-haired director shifted in her chair, but I kept my eyes on Ethan. The new office needs authority to investigate anyone. Department heads, senior officers, directors, even you. The room became still. Ethan did not blink. Agreed. Findings go directly to the independent committee, not through your office first. Agreed. Every employee terminated after reporting misconduct during Richard Halston's leadership receives an independent review. This time, Ethan paused. Not because he disliked the condition. He was calculating its cost. I could see it in the small tightening of his jaw. There may be hundreds of cases, he said. Then we begin with hundreds. One of the directors cleared his throat. Miss Bennett, reopening prior personnel decisions could expose Sterling to significant liability. The liability already exists, I said. Ignoring it only makes it quieter. Ethan studied me for another second, then nodded. Agreed. I finally touched the envelope. Inside was an offer to serve as interim vice president of ethics and corporate integrity, subject to formal ratification by the independent committee within 30 days. The salary was almost twice what I had earned the day before. There was a signing bonus large enough to erase my student loans and leave money in my savings account. I read every line twice. Richard had once told me that people became flexible when the number was high enough. Ethan had placed a very high number in front of me. There is another condition, I said. You will not buy my silence with compensation. A faint line appeared between his eyebrows. The salary reflects the responsibility. Then put in writing that I cannot be dismissed for investigative findings without a recorded vote by the independent committee. The silver-haired director looked offended. That is highly unusual. So is asking the analyst your former chief executive officer fired last night to lead an inquiry into your company. Ethan's gaze never left mine. Add the protection. An attorney revised the letter. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt as though I had stepped onto a bridge before learning whether it reached the other side. I signed at 10:23 that morning. By noon, my old access badge had been replaced with an interim executive credential that opened most administrative floors, but still respected research security restrictions. People noticed. They also noticed that Ethan walked beside me when we left the boardroom. Rumors traveled faster than elevators at Sterling Aeronautics. By the time we reached the 21st floor, conversations stopped whenever I passed. They think I helped you plan this, I said. Did you? No. Then the truth will survive the rumor. That is easy to say when no one believes you were promoted for professional reasons. His footsteps slowed. Is that what they are saying? They are not saying anything when I am close enough to hear it. The elevator doors opened. My former department stretched before us beneath rows of white lights. Cubicles. Glass offices. The familiar coffee station with the broken cabinet handle no one had repaired in 2 years. My former manager, Daniel Mercer, rose from his desk when he saw us. His face lost color. The previous day, he had watched security escort me away. That morning, the new controlling shareholder stood several feet behind me. Ethan glanced at me. This is your investigation. You decide how to enter the room. Then he stepped back. He did not introduce me. He did not announce my title. He gave me the space to speak for myself. I placed the cardboard box on my former desk. The framed photographs were still inside. My empty coffee mug rolled gently against the side as the box settled. Every analyst nearby watched me. Some looked curious. Some looked afraid. A few looked resentful. Daniel approached slowly. Claire, I did not know what Richard was doing. I remembered him staring at the carpet while my badge was taken. You knew he ordered me to change the report. I knew there was a disagreement. You knew enough to avoid looking at me. His shoulders dropped. For a moment, he did not look like a manager. He looked like a tired man in a wrinkled shirt who had spent years choosing safety one small decision at a time. I have 2 children, he said quietly. My wife is recovering from surgery. I could not afford to lose this job. Anger rose in me, hot and immediate. Then I saw the family photograph beside his monitor. 2 girls wearing matching Chicago Cubs caps. A woman smiling between them. Fear has a face when you stand close enough. I understand why you were afraid, I said. Relief flickered across his expression. But understanding is not the same as excusing. The relief disappeared. I need every email, meeting note, and approval request connected to those transfers. Nothing deleted. Nothing corrected after the fact. Am I under investigation? Everyone involved is under review, including me. He looked past me toward Ethan, who remained near the elevator. Does he always let other people deliver the difficult news? No, I said. Today, he is learning that power does not have to speak first. Something changed in Ethan's expression. Small, almost invisible, but I saw it. Daniel returned to his office, and the floor slowly began breathing again. My closest friend at Sterling, Maya Collins, approached from the far row of desks. Her eyes were red. I should have called you last night. Why did you not? I was afraid they were monitoring company communications. Then I heard that control of Sterling had changed, and I thought someone had invented the wildest rumor in Chicago. She glanced toward Ethan. Apparently not. I gave her the smallest smile I could manage. I need your help. With what? Finding everyone Richard taught to stay quiet. Maya's expression sharpened. That is going to be a long list. Then we start before it gets longer. She nodded once. No hesitation. By 3 o'clock, the technology and records teams had given us access to a secure digital archive, and we had converted a vacant conference room into a temporary office. Several boxes of older paper records covered one wall. Employee complaints filled 2 protected electronic folders. Some were recent. Others had been closed years earlier with identical phrases. Insufficient evidence. Performance-related separation. Matter resolved internally. Different names. Same silence. Ethan entered without his advisors and placed 2 cups of coffee beside the files. You have not eaten, he said. Neither have you. I attended a lunch meeting. Attending lunch and eating lunch are not the same thing. That sounds like criticism. It is an observation. He looked around the room, taking in the records, the notes, and Maya's color-coded timeline on the wall. You accomplished this in 4 hours? People talk quickly when they believe someone might finally listen. I handed him the oldest complaint. It came from a quality control engineer named Samuel Reed, who had warned senior leadership about falsified inspection records for years earlier. He had been dismissed 2 weeks later during a supposed restructuring. Ethan read the first page, then the second. His expression hardened into stillness. Was Richard connected to this? His signature approved the termination. Where is Reed now? Maya is locating him. Ethan closed the folder. Offer him the opportunity to return. You do not know whether he wants to return. Then offer him the choice Richard took away. His answer surprised me. I had expected strategy. I heard regret instead. Why does this matter to you? I asked. For the first time since we met, Ethan looked toward the windows rather than at me. The afternoon sky had cleared, revealing the river between the towers below. My father built a manufacturing company in Ohio, he said. He trusted the wrong partners. They hid problems until the company collapsed. 800 people lost their jobs. The men responsible left with bonuses. His voice remained controlled, but the silence beneath it felt old. Cross-capital began because I learned that ownership is the only language certain people respect. And now you control Sterling. Yes. What are you planning to prove? He turned back to me. That control can repair what control damaged. I wanted to believe him. That frightened me more than distrusting him had. My telephone vibrated on the table. Maya had found Samuel Reed. He had preserved copies of every document Richard's office had ordered him to destroy. At the bottom of her message were words that changed the shape of our investigation. The missing money was not the beginning. I looked up at Ethan. We have a larger problem. He held my gaze without flinching. Then we do not look away. The missing money was not the beginning, I said again, because the first time the words left my mouth, they did not feel real enough. Ethan stood across the conference table while late afternoon light faded against the windows. Maya had received encrypted photographs of documents Samuel Reed had preserved. Inspection reports. Internal warnings. Approval chains. Each page carried dates from 4 years earlier, long before I joined Sterling Aeronautics. The same executives appeared again and again. Richard Halston, Daniel Mercer, 2 vice presidents who still worked 3 floors above us. And one name I had not expected. Evelyn Shaw, the silver-haired director who had questioned my conditions that morning. Ethan read the names from a printed summary. Where is Reed? Outside Indianapolis. He owns a small equipment repair shop now. Send a car. I turned toward him. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. His expression did not change, but the room seemed to narrow. No, you do not send an unexpected car to a former employee who believes powerful people destroyed his career. You call him. You explain who you are. You ask whether he is willing to speak. Time matters. So does consent. Maya stopped typing at the other end of the table. She stared at her screen with the intense focus of someone pretending not to hear us. Ethan lowered his voice. If these records are genuine, someone may try to discredit him before morning. Then protect the evidence. Do not control the witness. A long silence followed. I could hear the ventilation system humming above us and the faint sound of cleaning carts moving through the hallway. The previous day, I would not have spoken to Ethan that way. The previous day, I had not known whether he was a rescuer, an opportunist, or simply another man who believed power made permission unnecessary. Now I was beginning to understand that he could become any of those things, depending on whether anyone challenged him. He took out his telephone. What should I say? The question surprised me. I studied his face, searching for sarcasm. There was none. Tell him the truth. Which part? That Cross Capital took control of Sterling. That we found his complaint. That you cannot undo what happened, but you are asking for his help to expose it. Ethan dialed the number Maya had found and placed the call on speaker. It rang 5 times before a cautious male voice answered. Samuel Reed. Mr. Reed, my name is Ethan Cross. Cross Capital became Sterling Aeronautics' controlling shareholder this morning. Silence. Then a dry laugh. Congratulations. You bought control of a building full of people who know how to bury problems. Ethan looked at me. That is why I am calling. Samuel did not answer. Ethan continued, his tone controlled but less polished than usual. Claire Bennett found your complaint during an independent review. She believes your warning was ignored and that your termination was retaliation. Claire Bennett, Samuel repeated. The analyst Halston fired last night. My breath stopped. How do you know that? I asked. People at Sterling still talk to me. Quietly. They said Halston finally chose the wrong person. His words settled over the room. Ethan rested one hand against the table. We would like to meet with you. You would like my documents. Both, I said, but only if you are willing. Another silence. I could hear an air compressor running somewhere behind him, followed by the metallic click of a tool being set down. 4 years ago, I wrote a report showing that Sterling was approving parts from a supplier that repeatedly failed contract standards, Samuel said. No defective part reached a customer. My team stopped the shipments and replaced the components before delivery. That was not the scandal. The scandal was that management knew the supplier was failing and continued paying that company anyway. I looked at Ethan. Who owned the supplier? A private holding company, Samuel answered. I traced it to Evelyn Shaw's son. The boardroom flashed in my mind. Evelyn, sitting beneath soft morning light, warning that reopening personnel cases could expose the company to liability. She had not been protecting Sterling. She had been protecting herself. Do you still have the ownership records? I asked. I have emails, inspection photographs, payment schedules, and the original complaint with Mercer's notes. I can send encrypted copies tonight. The originals stay with me until we meet. Maya's fingers stopped moving. Daniel reviewed the complaint. He was the compliance manager assigned to close the case. My stomach dropped. Daniel had told me that he was afraid. He had shown me photographs of his family. I had allowed myself to believe that fear was the whole story. Will you meet us tomorrow? Ethan asked. Samuel exhaled slowly. I promised my daughter that I would attend her school concert tonight. I will not break that promise for Sterling again. Ethan opened his mouth, but I raised one hand. He stopped. Go to the concert, I said. Send the copies when you are ready. We can meet at 7 tomorrow morning at a diner near Lafayette, along Interstate 65. It is a long drive for all of us, but it keeps the meeting away from Sterling. There is a place near the interstate that opens at 6. I will send the address. We will be there. When the call ended, Ethan looked at me. You stopped me. You were about to ask him to change his plans. This company employs 6,000 people. Samuel has already lost 4 years because Sterling decided that his life mattered less than its schedule. His jaw tightened. You think I do not understand sacrifice. I think you understand it so well that you have started expecting it from everyone. The words remained between us. Maya quietly gathered her laptop and the printed files. I am going to verify the supplier records from another room, she said. A distant room. The door closed behind her. Ethan moved toward the windows. The city below had become a field of lights. My father missed every school event I had after I turned 11, he said. He was trying to save his company. Did he save it? No. Then perhaps missing everything was not the price of success. Perhaps it was only the price he believed he had to pay. Ethan turned. Something unguarded crossed his face, there and gone before I could name it. You speak as though every problem has a humane solution. No. I speak as though we should search for one before deciding that people are expendable. His telephone vibrated. He read the screen, and the softness vanished. Evelyn Shaw has called an emergency meeting of the Independent Committee for 8 tonight. On what grounds? She is challenging the process used to appoint you and demanding that your investigation be suspended. I laughed once, without humor. That was fast. She knows that we found something. Then we do not accuse her until we verify it. Claire. We protect Samuel. We preserve the records. We document the chain of evidence. If we move too early, she will call this revenge. Ethan walked back to the table. She is trying to remove you. Then let her try. You could lose the position before your first full day ends. I picked up the folder containing Samuel's complaint. My hands were steady now. Yesterday, I lost my job because one man believed fear would make me disappear. Today, another powerful person is making the same mistake. Ethan watched me with a look I had not seen before. Not approval. Not possession. Respect. What do you need? He asked. Every board communication concerning Samuel's complaint. Full access to supplier contracts. And Daniel Mercer in this room before the meeting. Done. He reached for his telephone. One more thing, I said. He waited. When Evelyn arrives, you do not defend me. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Why? I placed Samuel Reed's complaint at the center of the table. Because this time, I want the person who buried the truth to hear it from the woman she expected to silence. At 7:38 that evening, Daniel Mercer sat across from me in the temporary conference room with both hands wrapped around a paper cup he had not touched. The office beyond the glass walls was nearly empty. Chicago shone beneath us in cold rows of white and amber light, while the Independent Committee gathered one floor above. Ethan stood near the door, silent. Because I had asked him to be. Daniel looked older than he had that morning. Samuel Reed kept the complaint, I said. The cup trembled slightly between his hands. I assumed he might. He also kept your notes. Daniel closed his eyes. That was answer enough. Why did you close the case? He stared at the table. Evelyn Shaw came to my office herself. She said the supplier issue had already been corrected and that reopening it would damage an important business relationship. Her son controlled the supplier. I learned that later. But you signed the closure. Yes. One word. Heavy and clean. I wanted an excuse I could reject. Instead, he gave me the truth. Richard told me that Samuel was difficult, Daniel continued. He said the company needed loyalty during a sensitive contract negotiation. Then he showed me a restructuring list with my name at the top. His voice thinned. My wife had just received her diagnosis. We needed the insurance. I told myself no one was in immediate danger because Samuel's team had stopped the defective parts. So you allowed them to dismiss the person who found the problem? Yes. He finally looked at me. I have regretted it every day. Regret did not restore Samuel's career. I know. Regret did not prevent Richard from doing the same thing again. Daniel glanced toward Ethan. What happens to me now? Ethan remained still. This was not his question to answer. You testify before the committee, I said. You provide every document you retained. You explain who pressured you and what you signed. And then the Independent Committee decides whether you remain employed. Fear returned to his face. The same fear that had ruled him for 4 years. Claire, please. My family still depends on this job. Samuel had a family too. He lowered his head. Silence filled the room. I did not enjoy it. Accountability was not triumph. It was watching a frightened man face the cost he had transferred to someone else. At 7:55, Maya entered carrying a laptop and a sealed records box. We verified the supplier ownership through state filings and trust records, she said. The holding company was registered in Delaware, but its controlling trust belongs to Evelyn's son. Sterling paid the supplier almost $38 million over 5 years. Ethan's expression hardened. How much exceeded comparable market prices? At least $9 million, based on the preliminary contract review. Daniel looked as though the air had left the room. I did not know the amount. You knew enough? I said. The committee meeting began at 8 o'clock. Evelyn Shaw sat at the head of the table as though she still controlled it. Her silver hair was immaculate. Her navy suit showed no wrinkle. Around her, the committee members arranged folders and tablets beneath the recessed lights. Outside counsel sat near the end of the table to advise on procedure. Ethan entered first, but he did not take the central chair. He moved to the side of the room and remained standing. I walked in carrying Samuel's complaint. Maya followed with the verified ownership records. Daniel came last. Evelyn's eyes settled on me. Miss Bennett, this meeting concerns your interim appointment and the authority under which you began reviewing closed personnel matters. You should not continue an inquiry while your status is under consideration. I placed the complaint on the table. Then consider this before you vote. She did not touch it. This is not the time. It became the time 4 years ago when Samuel Reed reported a supplier that repeatedly failed inspection. A director near the window opened his folder. Evelyn remained composed. That matter was resolved. It was buried. Choose your words carefully. I did. I placed the ownership documents beside the complaint. The supplier was controlled through a trust belonging to your son. Sterling paid that company $38 million. Preliminary comparisons indicate that at least $9 million exceeded normal market pricing. The room shifted. Chairs moved. Screens lit. Evelyn looked toward Daniel, and for the first time, her confidence cracked. Mr. Mercer determined that the complaint lacked sufficient grounds. Daniel stood behind an empty chair. His face was pale, but his voice held. That determination was false. Every person at the table turned toward him. Evelyn Shaw instructed me to close the case, he continued. Richard Halston threatened my position if I refused. I signed the closure despite knowing that Samuel Reed's evidence was credible. Evelyn's expression sharpened. You are admitting professional misconduct in an attempt to protect yourself. No, Daniel said. I am admitting it because protecting myself is how this began. The sentence struck the room harder than any accusation I could have made. Evelyn reached for the ownership documents and scanned the first page. These records establish a family connection. They do not establish fraud. My son operated a legitimate company. Then you should have disclosed the relationship before participating in contract discussions and renewal votes, I said. The minutes show no disclosure and no recorded recusal. Records can be incomplete. Exactly, I said. That is why Samuel preserved his. Maya opened the laptop and played a recorded statement Samuel had sent with his documents. His voice filled the boardroom, steady and tired. He described the failed inspections, the pressure to approve the supplier, and a meeting where Evelyn told him that employees who disrupted important partnerships did not remain with Sterling for long. There was no dramatic language. Only dates, names, and facts. When the recording ended, no one spoke. Evelyn looked at Ethan. You planned this. Ethan finally stepped forward. I planned an acquisition. Claire did not plan Samuel's complaint. She followed the evidence. And you expect this committee to believe that she is independent while you stand beside her? I am not standing beside her to influence the outcome, he said. I am standing behind the rules she required me to accept. Something in the room changed then. The directors stopped looking at Ethan for permission. They began looking at the evidence. I understood what power felt like in that moment. It was not the ability to silence someone. It was the ability to make silence impossible. At 8:46, the independent committee voted to recommend Evelyn's temporary suspension from board duties pending review by the full board and outside counsel. The new board approved the suspension minutes later. Daniel was placed on paid administrative leave, with health coverage continuing until the investigation concluded. Samuel Reed was offered independent legal counsel, protection against retaliation, and the opportunity to discuss returning to Sterling if he wished. When the meeting ended, Evelyn gathered her papers with careful hands. She stopped beside me on her way to the door. You think this company will thank you for exposing its weaknesses? She asked. No, I said. I think it will become stronger when it stops calling dishonesty a strength. Her gaze moved to Ethan. He will eventually tire of your defiance. Then he will have to decide whether he hired my judgment or merely rented my agreement. Evelyn left without another word. The boardroom emptied slowly. Daniel paused at the door. I am sorry, he said. I believed him. That did not erase what he had done. Tell Samuel, I replied. When only Ethan and I remained, the city had gone dark beyond the glass. He stood across the long table, the same distance between us as that morning, but nothing felt the same. The committee supported you, he said. This was not a victory. Evelyn has been suspended. Daniel may lose his career. Samuel already lost for years. Employees trusted a system that failed them. Removing one director does not repair that. Ethan nodded slowly. What does? Time. Consistency. Decisions that cost us something. His telephone vibrated on the table. He read the message, and his expression changed. What happened? I asked. He turned the screen toward me. Cross Capital's primary lenders had received portions of Sterling's internal board materials from an unidentified source. They were freezing the undrawn portion of the acquisition bridge facility until an external audit could assess possible contract and disclosure violations. Sterling had enough unrestricted cash to operate for approximately 6 weeks, but the company could face payroll and supplier problems after that. I looked up at Ethan. Someone sent them the documents before the committee finished meeting. Yes. Can Cross Capital cover the gap? He did not. Answer immediately. For the first time since I met him, certainty left his face. Not without additional approval from my partners or a new credit facility. The truth settled between us. Exposing corruption had opened the door. Now we had to keep the building from collapsing around everyone still inside. I closed the boardroom folder. Then tomorrow, you are going to learn whether your principles survive when they become expensive. Ethan held my gaze. And you? I already paid for mine once. I walked toward the door, then stopped. This time, I intend to make them worth the price. At 4:15 the next morning, Ethan and I were driving south through darkness toward Lafayette, Indiana. Rain moved across the windshield in thin silver lines. Neither of us had slept. He sat beside me in the back of the sedan with a financial forecast open on his tablet, but he had not moved past the same page in 20 minutes. You are not reading that, I said. I am considering it. You have been considering the same paragraph since we crossed the state line. You monitor people closely. It is becoming part of my job. He turned off the screen. The quiet that followed did not feel empty. It felt honest. At 7 o'clock, we met Samuel Reed at a diner beside Interstate 65. The air smelled like coffee, fried potatoes, and wet pavement. Samuel wore a brown work jacket and carried 4 years of evidence in a dented metal case. Before we discussed Sterling, he showed me a photograph from his daughter's concert. She stood beneath stage lights holding a violin, smiling with the complete confidence of a child who had found her father in the audience. She kept looking at the third row to make sure I was still there, he said. I missed too many things when I worked for Sterling. Ethan studied the photograph. My father missed mine too. Samuel looked at him for a moment, then closed the case between them. Then do not build another company that teaches people to make the same mistake. Ethan did not defend himself. I will not. We spent 2 hours reviewing original inspection records, supplier invoices, and handwritten notes. Samuel signed a statement confirming the chain of custody and agreed to provide testimony through independent counsel. He did not agree to return to Sterling. Not yet. Claire from 1 year earlier might have tried to persuade him. The woman sitting in that diner understood that restoration offered without choice was only another form of control. Take the time you need, I said. Sterling will have to prove that it has changed before asking you to trust it. Samuel nodded once. That is the first sensible offer anyone from that company has made me. By 10:45, Ethan and I were back in the Chicago boardroom. Coffee cups crowded the table. Financial reports covered every empty chair. Outside the windows, the city had turned pale beneath a low gray sky. Ethan stood at the far end of the room while his Cross Capital partners appeared on a video screen behind him. Their voices were controlled, but their message was not. They would not approve unrestricted additional funding while lenders remained uncertain and an external investigation threatened existing contracts. One partner called Sterling contaminated. Another recommended an immediate reduction of 15% of the workforce, nearly 900 people. Ethan listened without interrupting. I watched his face become still. No broad layoffs before we complete the cash review, he said. The oldest partner leaned closer to his camera. Then sell the research division. That division employs 1,200 people and holds Sterling's most valuable future contracts. You cannot save everything. Ethan looked toward the windows. No, but I can decide what I refuse to sacrifice first. He ended the call. The screen went dark. For several seconds, no one moved. Maya looked down at the cash forecast. Without replacement financing, Payroll becomes uncertain in 43 days. 39, I said. Several overdue supplier payments become payable before payroll. Ethan turned toward me. What would you do? It was the first time he had asked that question in front of the financial team. Every executive at the table waited for me to offer something brilliant. I had nothing brilliant. Only the truth. We stopped pretending this is only a financial problem. I opened the folder Samuel had given us. Sterling lost money because its leaders rewarded silence. We begin restoring trust by showing that honesty has value. One executive frowned. Trust does not fund payroll. No. Customers fund payroll. Suppliers fund operations. Employees protect both. Right now, all three expect us to hide. I placed a draft public statement on the table. It disclosed the independent investigation, the related party contracts, and the steps we were taking to preserve evidence and protect customers. It did not accuse anyone of a crime. It did not hide the facts we had verified. No polished excuses. No carefully buried language. You want to disclose this before the external audit is finished? Ethan asked. We disclose what has been confirmed and identify what remains under review. Sterling's stock price could fall. It will fall. Customers could delay contracts. Some will. And you still believe disclosure is the answer? I met his eyes. The truth becomes more expensive every hour we store it. He read the statement twice. Outside counsel revised 2 sentences to distinguish verified facts from pending conclusions. Then Ethan signed it. By 2 in the afternoon, the announcement had reached major financial outlets. Sterling's stock price fell. 2 customers requested emergency meetings. A supplier shortened its credit terms. Ethan's partners called again. This time, he answered and repeated the same decision. At 4 o'clock, he entered the employee auditorium with me beside him. 600 workers filled the seats. Thousands more watched through a secure internal broadcast. Their faces held anger, suspicion, and fear. Ethan stepped to the microphone. You have been told that protecting a company means protecting its leaders, he said. That was wrong. A company is the people who design its products, inspect its work, answer its customers, maintain its buildings, and speak when something is not right. Sterling failed people who did exactly that. Samuel joined through a live video connection from his attorney's office. Ethan did not offer him a ceremonial title or a rehearsed apology. He offered him the time to speak. Samuel described what had happened in plain words. He did not ask for sympathy. He asked the company to make sure that the next person who reported a problem did not stand alone. When he finished, the auditorium remained silent. Then one engineer stood. Another followed. Within seconds, everyone was on their feet. The sound was not celebration. It was recognition. They were not applauding Ethan. They were applauding the truth that had finally been allowed inside the building. That afternoon, 3 employees submitted evidence concerning separate misconduct. 2 major customers agreed to continue their contracts if independent inspectors were placed inside Sterling facilities. Over the next 48 hours, a regional bank offered a temporary credit facility, but only if Ethan personally guaranteed a significant portion of the loan and Cross Capital provided additional collateral. His advisors warned him that he was concentrating too much personal risk in one company. He signed anyway. He pledged a substantial investment portfolio and 2 unencumbered properties as collateral while Cross Capital negotiated the remaining facility. When I found him alone in the boardroom late that evening, he was removing his watch and placing it into a small wooden box. Please tell me the watch is not part of the collateral. It was my father's. Then keep it. It is worth more than some people earn in a year. That is not why you are holding it. His fingers stopped against the lid. He wore it on the day his company closed. Then it is not a symbol of failure. What is it? A reminder that losing a company and losing yourself are not the same thing. Ethan closed the box and returned the watch to his wrist. You make difficult choices sound simple. They are not simple. Then why do you never hesitate? I looked toward the dark windows. I hesitate every time. I simply stopped allowing fear to make the decision. He absorbed that in silence. My father believed that saving his company would justify everything he lost along the way, he said. I spent most of my life believing that control would protect me from becoming him. Did it? No, what changed? His eyes found mine. Someone began telling me no. The words carried no irritation, only gratitude. He had not learned to become less powerful. He had learned that power did not make him complete. 6 weeks later, The external audit confirmed every major financial finding and found no evidence that non-compliant parts had reached customers. Evelyn Shaw resigned from the board. Richard Halston became the subject of civil claims and regulatory inquiries, while Sterling permanently removed him from every leadership role. Daniel testified fully. The independent committee removed him from management, but allowed him to remain in a non-supervisory position after considering his cooperation, his family circumstances, and Samuel's statement that accountability should leave room for genuine repair. Samuel eventually returned as Sterling's Director of Quality and Product Integrity. His office was one floor below mine, and his daughter's concert photograph stood beside his computer. Sterling did not recover overnight. Trust never does. Customers returned gradually. Employees stopped whispering near elevators. Good faith reports increased because people no longer expected punishment for raising concerns. Retaliation complaints fell. My interim appointment became permanent after a unanimous committee vote, and my office continued reporting independently from Ethan and the rest of executive management. 1 year later, Sterling posted its strongest employer retention and quality results in a decade. On the anniversary of the change in control, I found Ethan in the lobby where we had first spoken. Rain traced silver lines down the windows. He held 2 cups of coffee. "Do you still send cars before people agree to ride in them?" I asked. "Only when I am prepared to accept no." He offered me 1 cup. I learned that from someone difficult, principled, relentlessly. I accepted the coffee. Our fingers touched for less than a second, but neither of us pretended not to notice. "Claire," he said, and the control in his voice softened into something quieter. "Would you have dinner with me?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is a car already waiting?" "No car. No reservation. No plan made without your answer. You are improving." "That is not an answer." I let him wait, because patience was another lesson power rarely learned on its own. Then I smiled. "Yes, dinner." The word seemed to surprise him more than every refusal I had given him. We stepped toward the revolving doors together, not because he had arranged my path and not because I owed him anything. I chose it. We stood beneath the same white lights, but neither of us was the person who had entered that lobby a year earlier. I had once believed power belonged to whoever owned the building. Ethan had believed it belonged to whoever controlled the outcome. We had both been wrong. Power belonged to the person willing to tell the truth before it became safe. Character belonged to the person willing to listen after it became costly. Ethan could still buy almost anything, but the only thing that changed him was the one thing I had never agreed to sell.